right, so top 5 wild cards. We're going to do an honorable mentions bit first. So we're going to talk through some cards that I think are going to be pretty good, might have an impact, but probably aren't going to be the most impactful cards from the set. Starting with Primordial Wave, we just talked about this one for Standard. I think this card is good. I think it's playable in Wild, but the problem is the biggest decks in Wild right now, or the biggest deck in Wild that might want to run it, is Shutterwalk Shaman, and you actively don't want to evolve your own minions. So that part of it is actually sort of a downside. So you'd rather just honestly run Devolve in that deck. So like I said when I was doing the Standard one, I don't base this as a like the most powerful cards necessarily that I think in a vacuum, but the ones that are going to have the biggest impact. And I just don't see this one having an impact because the two main decks that might want it being Shutterwalk Shaman and then something like Even Shaman. Even Shaman obviously can't even run it. And then Shutterwalk Shaman doesn't want to evolve its own creature. So moving on, Pelagos the Priest Legendary. I think this card's very good. It says after you cast a spell on a friendly minion, set its attack and health to the higher of the two. This is going to be really good. It's going to slot right into the Inner Fire Priest, but it's not gonna be, I don't even know if that deck wants to run this over some of the other minions that it has. It's good, but I just don't see it being the defining card. The Inner Fire Priest's problem is not getting a big minion on board. It's keeping it on board, not getting it devolved, silenced, killed in some way. So like that, this doesn't really help with that other than letting it diversify its threats a little bit. So I'd be happy to be wrong about this card. I think it's a really cool card, but I don't think it's going to be as high impact as a lot of people are thinking it's going to be. Speaking of that, I'm going to say the same thing for Kel'Thas Sinstrider. So people are comparing this to the original, which is Kel'Thas Sunstrider, which is the same effect, but for spells instead of minions. So every third spell you play each turn costs 0. The reason I don't see this being nearly as good is that A, there's a lot less 0-cost minions than there are 0-cost spells. So it's a lot harder to abuse this. But and the other thing is a lot of spells draw you cards, right? So there's a lot less minions that draw you cards. So it's harder to cycle through your deck and sort of, you know, combo off with this card than it is with the regular Sunstrider. So the reason I put this here in honorable mentions is it does have a really cool synergy in Rogue. If you get 0-cost copies of the Null plus the Sonya, which is a 3-mana rogue minion that whenever one of your minions dies, you get a 1-cost copy that costs 1, or a 1-cost copy that's a 1/1. So you can abuse that with Null because those Nulls will be 0. You can, and they have Rush, so you can play 2 of those for free, kill them off, play a 3rd minion with Kel'Thas that's free, etc., etc., and then you could sort of combo off that way. But you'd still need card draw somehow. So I don't even see where you really go with it in that deck either. I'm interested to see if it's good. But I put it here just because, I mean, obviously anything that lets you power out, you know, possibly 10-cost minions for free is it's very abusable, but I just don't see it being as impactful as the other Kel'Thas for Wild. Next card moving on is Dispose of Evidence. So Dispose of Evidence is a 0-cost Demon Hunter card. It says give your hero +3 attack this turn, and then you choose a card in your hand to shuffle into your deck. So obviously the second half is a downside, but 0 mana deal 3 or 3 damage, which basically is what this is insane. So you guys already saw, we're going to talk about it here again in a minute, the card Magnifying Glaive, the weapon that lets you draw 3. So there's a lot of synergy with this card with that. Not to mention just if this is the last card in your hand, you play it, there's no card in your hand to shuffle into your deck. So it's just a 0 mana 3 damage. There's a lot of really good synergies in Demon Hunter. Lady Theno from the last set, the 3 mana 2/4 with immune while attacking, that attacks every time you cast a spell, is insane with this card. Again, if this is the last card in your hand, there is no downside. It's just a 0 mana deal 3, and I think that's going to be a lot easier than people are giving it credit for if you build your deck towards that. And there's a lot of cards in the set for Demon Hunter. That's kind of the theme in Demon Hunter, is empty your hand and draw. There's a lot of cards that help you empty your hand so that this can be the last card in your hand. And then there's literally no downside, which then lets you attack with Magnifying Glaive, draw back up to 3, do the same thing next turn. So I really like this style for Demon Hunter. I think it's going to be really cool and lead to some really cool decks. And I think this card is going to be one of the reasons why that deck is good. I'm honestly scared that this might be a little too good, but we will see. The reason it's in honorable mention and not in the top 5 is that this is Wild, and Demon Hunter just doesn't have a deep enough card pool yet to really be overpowered. So maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe this is what will push Demon Hunter into the top tier, but I just don't see it. Last but not least on the honorable mention list is Gigantodom. Gigantodom, I think I'm saying that right. It's a totem. It's a 10 mana 8/8, but it costs 1 less for each totem you've summoned this game. Slots right into Even Shaman. I think it's a very, very good card, but it doesn't really solve the problem that Even Shaman already has of being just a little bit too fair and too slow for Wild. So I love this card. I think it goes in that deck. I think it makes that deck better, but I don't know that it's enough to make that deck into one of the top tier decks, which is why it's here and not farther up the list. So moving on, top 5 list for Wild. The number 5 coming in is Solid Alibi. It's a mage card, 2 mana. Until your next turn, your hero can only take 1 damage at a time. This card is obnoxious. I hate this card. So there's a minion that had this effect, and the reason that card was never good, the only reason that card wasn't good is because it was on a minion. So you could just kill the minion first and then hit the hero in the face. So this card I think is much better than that card. It's only 2 mana. And it's honestly going to save you a ton of damage. It's going to prevent a lot of burst turns. And Mage already has the best stall card in the game with Ice Block, which is a 3 mana secret that when you take lethal damage, you prevent it and become immune. So this synergizes very well with that. You play this on the turns leading up to stall an extra turn so that your Ice Block lasts you a little bit longer. So you have a little bit more time to pull off your combos. That's what Mage is all about right now. I could see Quest Mage running this. Quest Mage honestly might not even need it because that deck's already fast enough. That deck needs a nerf, but this card is going to enable a lot of combo Mage decks to, I mean, it just gives them extra turns. And that's all those decks really need is cycle through their deck, stall as long as they can. Yeah. This card is really good. I honestly might have this underrated. Moving on to number 4 in my top 5 cards for Wild is Necrolord Draka. Her battle cry is equip a 1/3 dagger. Oh, thanks, Alex. So Necrolord Draka, equip a 1/3 dagger, and it gets +1 attack for each other card you played this turn. This card is absolutely nuts. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter arguing with me on this card, and I don't get it. In Standard, this card is going to be excellent, and Wild, this card is absolutely insane. There are going to be decks built around this card. There are going to be decks built to abuse this card. There are going to be people hitting people in the face for 10, 15 damage on turns 3, 4, 5. I promise you this card is absolutely insane. Just be prepared for it. Be ready for it. Weapon removal might have to be a thing until this card gets nerfed, which it might inevitably get nerfed. I will be happy to be wrong about this card because I actually think this card could be very problematic for Wild. It's super strong. It's, again, the top 5 list for Wild for this set was actually really hard for me to do. I feel like all 5 of the cards that I have in my top 5 could be even higher. Like I might have these out of order. I think this card's absolutely insane. All right, this one's going to be controversial. I don't think a lot of people have this card pegged as a Wild staple, but Wild right now is basically combo decks, hyper aggro, or control decks that play tons of disruption to counter all of the combo decks. So Theotar the Mad Duke is a 4 mana 3/3, which isn't a great body, but its battle cry says discover a card in each player's hand and swap them. And that effect is going to be game winning sometimes, like just absolutely game winning. You're going to play this on turn 4, turn 3. You're going to steal a key combo piece from a combo deck. They're going to rage quit, right click the little settings button at the bottom and click the concede button, and they're going to alt F4 and close the game and uninstall. Like this card is literally going to ruin people's day. It is one of the most powerful disruption tools I think they've printed in a long time. It's right up there with like Mutinous, but it's 3 mana cheaper. It's really hard for combo decks to win when you're constantly messing with what they've got going on. So I believe that this card is going to see a lot more play than people are giving it credit for, especially in Wild. There's a lot less to hit in Standard, but I mean, just hitting one of your opponent's minions or spells that they require for their combo and just stealing it is going to absolutely wreck people. So top 5 cards for Wild. I have number 2, Anonymous Informant. So 2 mana 2/3, and the next secret you play costs 0. So this card, when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then the more I've thought about it, it's the fact that this is a 2 mana spell that basically gives you a 2 or 3 mana spell for free. The fact that the effect extends over several turns. The fact that Secret Rogue got a ton of support this set. Secret Mage is already a fringe playable Wild deck that's getting a ton of support this set. Again, my top 5 list aren't the top 5 like best cards, the ones that I think are the most powerful, but they're ones that I think are going to have, again, the cards for my list are not the cards that I think are the best or the most powerful. They're the cards I think that are going to have the biggest impact, and this card is going to have a huge impact on Wild. Huge impact. It's going to slot into Secret Mage. It probably replaces Kirin Tor Mage. It's cheaper on curve. It lets you keep that effect until you draw a secret, which is actually something that will come up. There's a lot of times where you have to play Kirin Tor Mage, the 3 mana 4/3 for tempo, but you don't have a secret in hand to play with it. So this is going to be an impactful card. Again, maybe maybe the secret decks don't end up being good enough, and then this card doesn't see as much play as I'm thinking. But given how much support secrets got in this set, I think this is going to be a very impactful card for Wild. And last but certainly not least, number 1 top 5 wild cards is Magnifying Glaive. So this card also made my top 5 list for standard, and the only reason it wasn't higher on that list is because of the lack of cheap spells and minions to play with it in standard. That's not a problem in Wild. So you have already odd Demon Hunter is probably the best Demon Hunter deck, and it already has a super low curve, plays mostly 1-drops. I could even see this being good and just a regular Demon Hunter that doesn't play odd, that just plays the 0-cost ones as well. This is just going to be an insane card. You dump your hand, you play this on turn 3 or 4, draw 3, attack. The next turn, you dump your hand again, attack, draw 3 more cards, gives you a ton of burst potential. This card, again, I would be shocked to see this card stay at 3 mana. It's insanely good. It's going to be the reason people are playing weapon removal all over in standard and in wild. I cannot believe this card is printed as is. Would be happy to be wrong about this one as well, but I don't think I am. There's, you know, when you make card draw this good, with even if it does have some restrictions, people are going to find a way to abuse it. Like it's worth building your deck around this card being good. So watch out for this card. If you're playing a slow deck, make sure you have weapon removal, because a Draka in this, you're going to need it or else you're going to die. So yeah, that's it for my top 5 wild cards. Let me guys know what you think I was right about, wrong about, any cards you think that I neglected to mention that should be on the list. Make sure you let me know.